encompasses a very large area, perhaps the biggest in the United States, if that's correct.
Close to it.
So you got some Eagle Ford, you got some Permian, so it'd be great to chat with him. And then we have Ben Shepherd. He's the president of the Permian Basin Petroleum Association, where he's been since 2006, and he's represented oil and gas interests before legislative bodies in Texas, New Mexico, and Washington. Next to him, we have OMAR GARCIA, who's the president of the South Texas Energy and Economic Roundtable, an industry-funded group that promotes education and economic development in the Eagle Ford Shale. And he was former vice president of the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation. And then next to him, we have LEODORO Martinez. He's the executive director for the Middle Rio Grande Development Council, which coordinates economic development over a 4,000 square mile plus area. And so I guess we will just start right off the bat. And this panel, we're kind of going to probe, we're going to try to explain really what has happened and kind of why we are all here and sort of what's unique about this boom, if we want to call it a boom. So I guess I'll just start off with Ben. I'm wondering if you could take us through, at least in the Permian Basin, could you explain to us really what's different now than we saw maybe in the last boom in the early 80s or so? We hear a lot about fracking, we hear a lot about horizontal drilling. What's different now in the Permian?
Well, thanks, Jim, and I also want to thank Evan and the Tribune staff for putting this on. I think that these conversations are really important for all of us to get all the perspectives out there. From a little bit of history of the Permian, I mean, we've been drilling wells out there since the 20s. It's been the most prolific oil field in the country for decades. What's different now is that obviously you've got other extremely powerful producing regions in the Eagle Ford and others around the country, Bakken and Marcellus and others, but technology's really been the driver in the last 5-6 years, especially being able to identify where the hydrocarbons are, being able to identify how to capture them and get them out of the ground in a responsible way. The technology has just continued to evolve, and it sounds a little cliche. Technology's done it. What I mean by that is hydraulic fracturing. I love the term frack-o-lantern. We seem to get fracked all the time about the terminology. Maybe there's a more pleasing term, but hydraulic fracturing is a process that's been used for about 60 years. But we've been able to, smart engineers and geologists have been able to figure out how to better harness that technology to maximize what they can produce. And so essentially that increases the amount of oil or gas you can produce. Some of the seismic analytic tools have allowed us to identify more accurately where it is, where we should drill, those kinds of things. So some of the risk has been reduced, which it's a very risky business even today. There's certainly no sure thing when you go out to drill an oil well. I don't care if you're a large company or a small company. You're going to invest a lot of money and you're going to swallow a lot of risk. But that has been reduced somewhat. And then you talk about the resource play. You hear that term used. Because of some of the technologies I've mentioned, you have a better feel for an area when you sort of drill in what you may call a fairway. You now have a better sense of your percentage of success or a hopeful success that you can kind of fill in the blocks on a section, whereas before it was much riskier. So it's more of a more of a manufacturing process.
And Mr. Garcia, and in a second I want to get to, we'll probe a little bit the differences between what's going on in West Texas and what's going on here. But Mr. Garcia, is there anything that you'd want to add to that sort of overall, why are we here now, from the Eagle Ford's perspective, or does that pretty much cover it? Is there anything?
The biggest reason that we're here is obviously the advent of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. Those two things have been able to have this economic development dream that I like to call it. I'll talk about the Eagle Ford in South Texas. Without those two things, you wouldn't be seeing $87 billion impact, 154,000 jobs, direct jobs. You know, my previous career, I was in economic development, and I was in economic development in Corpus Christi from 2001 to 2005. Two biggest projects I worked were an expansion at the Army Depot and bringing the Corpus Christi hooks to Corpus. Now you look at Corpus Christi, because of the Eagle Ford, there's no more land at the port. It's at a premium.
Sure.
You know, the number of jobs when Corpus Christi is now competing with San Antonio and Houston on a quarterly basis based on Texas Workforce Commission numbers, that is because of the oil and gas industry. It has truly transformed South Texas.
And it really is this kind of almost all technology, which has enabled us to find these new resources and reach them when they were once unreachable. Is
Absolutely.
exactly what you're saying. Good deal. And so I do want to give folks here a sense of, Ben, Mr. Shepherd, you were talking about it a little bit earlier, trying to distinguish between what's going on in West Texas and what's going on here in South Texas. So we talked a lot about the Eagle Ford, and obviously we're here in South Texas right now. I'm wondering if you could really quickly tell us what's different about those two regions.
He's already telling me to make it really quickly because I have a tendency to ramble, I guess. But you know, there's some significant differences. Obviously, we talk about the historic nature of the Permian. You know, it's been called the granddaddy of them all, and it's got a long life ahead of it, right? It's a huge area encompassing parts of 2 states. The thickness, the different layers of production, potential production out there is anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 feet, and I'm told that the Eagle Ford's more like 250 to 300. So, you know, there's a long life ahead, and the horizontal drilling, as Omar mentioned, is obviously a critical component of a tool to help us get there, get more of it out of the ground. I think just the sheer size is hard to match.
And Senator, your district, as I mentioned, encompasses both of these regions. I guess from a governing standpoint and what you've seen, how you've seen the industry evolve in each region, have you seen any major differences between the Permian and Eagle Ford, or is it just kind of one big boom that you're watching?
I think there are differences, and as Ben said, and so you'll know that my district goes from San Antonio all the way to West Texas. The Pecos and Reeves County has 17 counties. It's about 30,000 square miles. So I'll have a portion of the Eagle Ford down south in my district, and then part of the Permian. But as Ben said, the Permian's been there for 60 years, and I think there's a lot we can learn from what they've done. There have been some growing challenges that have presented themselves in the Eagle Ford. Obviously, these two gentlemen are dealing with on a daily basis as well. So I think there's some things that we can definitely learn from the Permian, hopefully going forward. And there have been lots of challenges, but what I like to talk about is that those challenges are also opportunities. And they should, so hence the term challenging opportunities that have presented themselves.
And when we're talking about challenges that we can sort of translate to learning from the Permian into the Eagle Ford, and anything specific? Are you talking about the infrastructure and kind of maybe the time lag in terms of building that out to meet demands?
Exactly. 5 years ago, most folks didn't know what the Eagle Ford Shale was, and those communities certainly weren't prepared for what happened literally overnight, as the mayor's talked about in the first presentation. So the lack of infrastructure has been the biggest challenge, I would submit to you, and everything that comes from that. And infrastructure doesn't just mean roads and highways, which is a problem and which is a challenge, but the housing, the restaurants, et cetera, has been the biggest challenge.
And is this something, and I'll throw a jump ball question up there, I promise I wouldn't do many of these, but with these challenges that we're seeing now, are these new? I mean, did we see such serious infrastructure problems in past booms in the 80s or before? If anybody.
Well, these guys are a lot older than I, so they probably should take that question.
Mr. Martinez, is that something that you wanted to look at? Have you seen the infrastructure challenges, and we'll get more specific later in this panel and other panels, but have we seen such serious challenges that, in past booms that we're seeing now, at least in the Eagle Ford?
Not in our area. We've never experienced anything close to it. That's historically, you look at what the Permian's gone through. They've already gone through this. They've experienced this before, and they're probably more prepared at this point. But for us in South Texas, our area, it's transformation. It's almost like starting from scratch. We were certainly in very few of our communities were prepared for the kind of impact, and it's beyond infrastructure. It goes on to it's a way of life that's been challenged at this point.
And so how, Mr. Martinez, do you grapple with that? I mean, I assume that there's, and I hear, when I'm doing my reporting, that there's a lot of like learning as you go and so forth. But when we're talking about what maybe we could learn from what happened in the Permian in the past, I mean, is there anything, any textbook that you're pulling out, or anything that you're looking to now to try to understand what y'all are dealing with?
Yeah, the biggest message I think that the Permian has tried to get the rest of the state to hear is that everybody benefits from what happens at the Permian level. But we're going through the same thing with Eagle Ford Shale. The whole state of Texas is benefiting from it economically, and that's the hardest message that it's hard for us to relay that out, because in return, when you talk to our local communities, when we put ourselves in the overall the major 21 counties that are being affected, there's very little in return that's coming back as far as the revenues that are being generated through the severance and oil and gas tax. And to us, that's the biggest challenge, is getting the rest of the state to understand that if you do that type of investment, everybody benefits. And that's something that I think the Permian has been grappling with for a long time. And now they've got new partners because there's other shale areas that are being affected that way. It's not just themselves. But to me, that's the biggest difference. It's the biggest message.
Sure. And we'll be getting into a few more specifics on some of those issues in a panel later in the day when we'll have the Representative Keffer and Commissioner Smitherman. But I do want to ask you, Senator, and you have proposed legislation on some of these very issues to try to get try to shift some money to the communities that are dealing with this. Do you feel like Texas as a state has done enough to help local communities who are grappling with the infrastructure challenges?
Absolutely not. We haven't done enough. I had a bill last session, as you know, Senate Bill 1747, that for the first time in probably history of Texas, for as far back as anyone can remember, the legislature funded our county roads to the tune of $225 million. These folks will tell you, and other folks in the industry will tell you, it's a drop in the bucket, but nonetheless, it's a good start, and it gets us down the road, no pun intended. We certainly need to come back this next legislative session and figure out a formula that puts some of that money back into those energy zones. And the way the bill was crafted, in order to get it passed, we had to spread the wealth around to the other counties, if you will. But unfortunately, that's just not enough money. That's not going to get the job done. So this next legislative session, I'm hoping to be able to work with my colleagues, both in the Senate and the House, that don't represent these energy zones, but as has been said this morning, nonetheless, everyone benefits. Regardless of where you live in Texas, you're benefiting as a result. And we just have to carry that message to Austin and convince them that it is the golden goose, and if we don't protect it, we're going to have trouble down the road.
And I've been curious as I've been doing my reporting, working on our Shale Life project, being in these communities. It's been interesting to see how much the industry really has become kind of woven into the fabric of society, so to speak. And I'm wondering, Mr. Garcia, if you could talk a little bit about, I do see in several communities, the town of Pearsall just sort of springs to my mind, that as the industry is making investments in these shale plays for the long haul, it is bringing in infrastructure too. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about to what extent the industry has been collaborating with communities to try to, as much as it can or wants to plug some of these gaps and bring in some of its own infrastructure.
Sure. South Texas, if you're not from South Texas, is extremely rural. There was very limited infrastructure to begin with, and when this type of activity started to happen in 2009, as LEODORO mentioned, we weren't prepared. But industry is making every effort. You have over $1 billion this year in new pipeline. We talked about the roads. The steer operators. have given millions of dollars to the counties, to the individual counties where they operate, to help repair some of the roads, to offset some of those damages. STEER was created to connect industry with the stakeholders. That was the basis for creating STEER. And the reason for it is, there's so many companies out there. So when a community like Pleasanton or Gonzales calls and they have a need, they call me, they call my staff, and we're able to help with a lot of their issues. For example, just some of these things are simple, but the city of Gonzales needed a new pipe for a roping arena. I had 5 companies donate new pipe. The city of Cuero needed an updated library on some new software. STEER company stepped up and provided the funding to help with some of that. Those are just a couple of examples of the steps that industry is taking to help with some of the impacts that are causing in South Texas. One of the biggest things that my operators like to tell me is we want to leave South Texas in better shape than we found it. So you're seeing a lot of investment in infrastructure and a lot of investment in the communities in which we operate in.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Martinez, do you feel like, and you're sort of also at that nexus of facilitating economic development in these local governments, do you feel like right now, or is it too soon to say, whether the Eagle Ford is in better shape, at least in terms of infrastructure, than we found it?
I don't think that we're there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the overall plan, as you know, that we established our consortium with the whole idea of bringing all the key community players together to be able to establish that. And you got to understand that when OMAR says that our communities were very rural based, they're very rural based. The infrastructure that existed was very limited. So the improvements that we've seen have been through what we call the reactionary phase. We've reacted to the increase in population, to the increase in activity, the increase in usage of our infrastructure. So basically, we've been catching up, just trying to keep up with what's before us. However, the one thing we've learned, based on all the factors, is that this is going to be around for a while. And based on that, we can do some proper planning. We can do some good partnering. And the people that are a part of our consortium is every walk of life, including the industry. The industry was at the table with us when we originated, when we founded the consortium. And it had to do with, originally had to do with just simple workforce. How do we get enough workers to facilitate the demand? It's grown into something a lot larger through the educational process, through the engagement of UTSA, all the colleges, all the training institutions that are around it. Now we've gotten to where we have a common dialogue with the state agencies that can help and assist and partner with the infrastructure issues. So I think we're on our way. To answer your question, we talk about sustainability. We talk about that our communities, our leaders, need to have this vision of having a lot better community than the way it was when the first, in 2009. Mm-hmm. The consortium will be celebrating our 4th anniversary this coming month in November. And we've seen just about every approach or type of reaction to the different aspects as they walked into our communities, and never losing sight that at the end we have this sustainable vision that we're going to end up in better shape than the day it was founded. But it takes strong leadership. It takes strong backing. And again, I can't emphasize that we need to have that ongoing support at the state level, at the federal level, to make sure that it does happen.
Sure, and as we dissect this broad term of infrastructure, we've talked about roads, and we talked about roads a lot. It's one of probably the things that comes up most when you're reporting down there, asking folks how they feel. But obviously water is a really big issue. And I'm wondering, Mr. Shepperd, if you could talk a little bit about the extent to which, as Texas's drought continues, we have dwindling resources there. To what extent water resources is a big challenge to the oil and gas industry, and if you can, and to what extent the industry is moving more towards reusing some of that resources, or figuring out other ways to meet that demand.
Well, I'm happy to take the easy questions. And I do appreciate the work that our legislators have to deal with. We have a ever-changing makeup of the legislature and some increasingly serious infrastructure challenges that need attention. And so appreciate the work that they do. Water is one of those. You know, I think we're all aware here that we've been in drought conditions, you know, historic drought conditions for a couple decades now, really. And I remember when I lived in San Antonio in a previous life back in the early 90s, so we were concerned at that time about the drought. And here we are in, you know, 2014, and you know, we've gotten some rain this year, maybe some relief is on the way. But, you know, to begin with, the West Texas is a semi-arid desert, and you pile on the drought conditions on top of that, and it's even worse. And it's, you know, it's also heavy agriculture, heavy oil and gas. We use water in our industry. 5 years ago, the term recycling was kind of just something you heard in the cities. We would try to recycle our plastics and things like that. But what's happened in the industry, I'm really proud to talk about this just a minute, is that industry has taken, recognized the challenges that we cannot, even though if you're a landowner out there, certainly it's your right to sell your water to an oil company. Nobody wants to stop you from doing that, but at the end of the day, we need to preserve our precious resources, right? But industry is, you know, for a number of reasons, taken it upon themselves to invest in technology for recycling purposes. And you know, I can name you a half a dozen companies now that recycle 80 to 90% of their water. Repeated usage.
And I hear
5 years ago, the number was 0.
Mm-hmm. And I hear a lot of those stats too. And I'm wondering, I've also heard, and this was, I guess, at the end of 2013 when I was reporting, so I'm wondering if there's maybe something new percolating up, but that there are certain companies that are really taking a lead effort on this, and then there's others that are not, because fresh water in many respects, in many regions, is still cheaper to get than recycling. And I think it was someone at the Texas Water Recycling Association just sort of ballpark estimated that probably, you know, 1% or so of money spent on disposing of wastewater was maybe being spent industry-wide on recycling. Does that sound right to you, or does that sound low, or what have you been hearing?
Well, I'm not going to argue with those numbers.
Yeah.
Those guys study those numbers and probably are pretty close. But I would say to that those numbers, if it is a 1% number, that just shows you the amount of money that companies are spending on disposal,
Sure.
right? And it's immense. Every well that's being drilled out there, you know, Texas has the #1 rig count in the country, and there's about 560 of those are in the Permian alone. I think around 200 and something in the Eagle Ford, you know. You know, it's each one of those uses water. So I would say also that, you know, if 1% is the number, 5 years ago it was 0.
Sure.
And it represents a big economic investment. The larger companies are the first for a number of reasons. They have the economic wherewithal to do it. Also, they have their contiguous acreage positions. You know, they have large areas where they are drilling, planning to drill, and so they can invest and get their economies of scale on the infrastructure investments that are required. If you're just a guy that's out there drilling 1 or 2 wells, it's hard for you to justify putting in the investment for permanent recycling facilities. And the mobile technology is coming along, but maybe not quite there yet.
Sure. And Mr. Garcia, in the Eagle Ford, to what extent, how is the water situation working? I mean, are there any sort of innovative collaborations between towns and companies to kind of figure that out as you know, demands are increasing for water that's scarce?
I think you know, I'll echo what Ben is talking about. You know, we've had a drought in South Texas. We've seen a lot more rain this year, obviously, but you know, depending on the geology and the location of where these companies are drilling in the Eagle Ford, there's availability of brackish water, and some of these companies are using 50% of their brackish water to complete a well. That's an amazing stat. You know, we've got other companies that are reducing water by 34% year after year after year. So the technology is coming online. You have a lot of companies still working on water recycling. They're working with several companies out of Austin, actually, that are in the Eagle Ford. So there's a big emphasis on water recycling. Those are things you're going to continue. But as Ben mentioned, it just depends on where their acreage is. Is it contiguous? You know, there's a lot of variables, but for the most part, the steer operators have a big emphasis on water recycling and reducing the amount of water being used.
That's a really, just quickly, that's a really important point that Omar brought up about the use of brackish water. Again, 5 years ago, nobody was doing it. It was believed that the chemical reactions with the salty water made it impossible to utilize. Now, that's no longer the case. And so then just everywhere you turn, we're reducing our emphasis on fresh water and looking at other sources.
And Senator, is there anything, you know, from the state's side that can be done to kind of speed up this process, or is this sort of just a natural industry process that you're letting happen when we're looking at water infrastructure, recycling, use of brackish water?
Well, I can tell you that there have been a lot of discussions. I sit on the Natural Resources Committee along with Senator Zaffarini, and we've started those discussions with the industry. I think they've come to the table. We've brought the stakeholders to the table. And perhaps this next legislative session, we need to do that again and think outside the box. Are there any incentives that can be offered to help them and encourage them to move it along quicker? But, you know, I agree with what's been said here. We've come a long way, but nonetheless, it is leaving a footprint, and we have to be very careful about how large of a footprint it leaves behind.
Sure, sure. And Mr. Martinez, looking at other infrastructure, human infrastructure, and we talked about this a little bit in the last panel, but the idea that there is in a lot of these places a worker shortage, whether it's you know, tough for governments to fill jobs where the industry is, you know, paying better, or you know, whether it's even you know, tough to fill jobs at grocery stores, that type of thing. Is that something that you're seeing is a serious issue in the Eagle Ford, and is there anything sort of exciting going on there in terms of trying to figure out how to fill positions maybe that aren't in the oil and gas industry?
Absolutely. That's a process that pretty much follows itself. Initially, as I stated earlier, that was the reason that we organized. It was how do we were asking the industry, give us, what are your occupational demands? And once we figured out that what the initial demand was going to be, and then looking on long terms on the production side, once you get into the production, it's different levels of training, different levels of skills that are necessary. And that's where we brought in the training institutions. We did a collaboration of the Alamo colleges out of San Antonio, Southwest Texas Junior College, Laredo Community College, South Texas College, the Del Mar College, the Coastal Bend colleges, Victoria colleges. All the training institutions that surrounded the shell itself, and decided that there had to be some sort of communication and collaboration so they could do cross referrals to be able to fill the job demands. And they've done an excellent job. We've had support from the state, from Texas Workforce Commission, from the coordinating board, keeping in mind that not all jobs are out in the field, that there's still a demand for accountants, there's still a lot of demand for engineers, and so the university, the educational system, plays a key role in all this process. Historically, everybody knows that South Texas is high unemployment counties. We double digits. LaSalle County at some point last year went down to 2.5%. It never breaks 4% anymore. Dimmitt County the same way. So when you put all the factors, I advise investors that want to come in, and every day they're coming in to build new businesses. You better put on your costs, on your overhead, that you're going to have to bring in the workforce to fill those jobs, because there's just not enough work. Now, when we talk about how the whole state benefits, the Rio Grande Valley, for example, has so many people working in the Eagle Ford Shale. And that's a kind of true economic development. That's money that's earned here and it's gone and spent back home. The Corpus Christi area, San Antonio, if you look at the numbers of San Antonio, these are counties that are not in the shale. But when you look at the economic impact that the study shows, it's incredible. So, yes, it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, and Mr. Garcia, and it's also a challenge for the industry, right? I mean, to find enough people to keep that operating, right?
Absolutely. You know, South Texas has done a phenomenal job, whether it's UTSA, Alamo colleges, Del Mar, Coastal Bend College. on providing the training and having the resources and the classes ready to go. Industry's challenge and our challenge is getting kids excited about the industry and going into the energy field. We're going to launch a huge initiative next year to go into the middle schools and high schools and talk to these kids about the energy industry. You can have a career, whether you want to be an engineer, geologist, an accountant, IT in the industry, the white collar jobs. If you want to go to a 2-year college, you have great earning potential as well too. But part of the problem is getting these South Texas kids excited. Our state elected officials want South Texas kids to take these high-paying, high-skilled jobs. But we got to get them excited, and we got to get them into these classes. So you're going to see, the steer operators came together and put a 25-page booklet on the Eagle Ford Shale, what it means to South Texas, what it means to the economy, and the career opportunities for these South Texas kids. So we're going to go into the schools next year, into these school districts, and start promoting the jobs that are available in the industry to help offset some of these issues of a labor shortage. The short term, industry's having to pull labor where they have to. If they have to run different shifts from the Eagle Ford to the Permian Basin, from the Eagle Ford to the Bakken Shale, where some of these companies have assets, they'll rotate the shifts. They'll bring the labor from Louisiana, they'll bring it in from Oklahoma. They can't wait. They have drilling schedules that have to be completed. So we're doing everything we can to start training the labor force.
And beyond just having openings and needing more work done, are there other challenges of maybe not having qualified labor? I do hear stories about when you think of maybe truck drivers that might not have appropriate training, and that can be dangerous. I hear stories about folks who aren't fully trained on some of the oil fields that are just kind of being shuffled in because of the shortage. Is that an issue that's being dealt with in Eagle Ford too?
Our companies place a premium on safety, and they work very closely with their contractors and the vendors to ensure that their safety standards are adhered. And if these companies and contractors are not adhering to their safety standards, those companies are gone. We do hear those stories, unfortunately. This economic activity happened so fast that people just started taking these jobs that didn't have the proper training. But you're seeing industry take a very hard line on some of their contractors to make sure that their safety protocols are being followed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Senator, I'm curious about when we're talking about a lot of these collaborations between towns and industry, and obviously bringing in other stakeholders too. Is there ever a risk that, or do you ever see a risk that the collaboration is almost too close, that industry might be making more decisions than they should, or there's less give and take, or do you feel like the relationships that are forming right now are kind of appropriate and balanced?
I think so. I think it's appropriate. I think the industry has done a very good job of stepping up, acknowledging their presence and accepting responsibility for what's happening out there. And I think the communities have accepted them as well and realized that but for that industry moving into those communities, they wouldn't be prospering. And a lot of folks are prospering. The unemployment rate is down. There are some challenges that exist, of course, but I think it's appropriate. I think whether we're in Austin or during the interim, they have responded to any of the questions and concerns that I've raised, and I believe that is the same throughout my district in South Texas. The economic impact has been tremendous. 4 years ago, if somebody would have said that Halliburton, Baker Hughes, Weatherford would have built a headquarters in my district just 20 minutes south of here, no one would have believed them. I mean, it's been tremendous. There are challenges bringing in the workforce, but I think that's just a role that we all have to step up and accept and get that information out to the community and to our students that the opportunities are here. They just need to take advantage of them.
Gotcha. And when we're talking about, I just want to, before, I think we have 10 minutes or so before we'll open it up to questions, but when we're talking about some of the challenges that the industry faces and some of the communities face, obviously environmental concerns ultimately come up, and when we're talking about hydraulic fracturing, sort of the mainstream criticism in the past has been groundwater and that kind of thing, but more and more it seems like people are talking about air quality, and the San Antonio Express News came out with their series a couple of months ago about flaring, and showing that flaring, the burning of the excess gas that's being separated from the oil into the atmosphere has increased 400% since 2009, and most of that's in the Eagle Ford, where 2/3 of it is in the Eagle Ford. It's 21 billion cubic feet, and basically the idea is that even though we have massive investments in pipeline infrastructure, maybe it's not enough to carry some of this gas away, which, and when you burn the gas, it's burning money. I'm wondering, Mr. Garcia, is there, obviously the industry doesn't want to burn this gas. It's, you want the infrastructure there so you can sell it. But can you address the kind of where the industry now is in the Eagle Ford when it comes to flaring and what it's doing now?
I think we have a great story to tell on flaring and air emissions and how we're going to reduce it. As I mentioned, a rural part of the state, infrastructure is catching up very quickly, more gathering stations, but this is a very technologically advanced industry. You're seeing a lot of vapor recovery units being put on rigs to reduce flaring. You're seeing conversion to natural gas, not only for drilling operations, but for some of the thousands of generators that are in Eagle Ford. You're seeing, San Antonio's whole CAT is going towards Tier 4 diesel engines, which are very, very low emission engines. Recently, we place a premium on reducing flaring. Those are some of the biggest things that we're working on right now. And you're going to see a big, significant reduction in flaring very soon with the new technology and things I just mentioned. At a recent conference in San Antonio, one of the steer operators said, "We don't flare in days anymore. We flare in hours." Not in days, but in hours. And that's a key statement that one of my member companies said, and that is because of the technology that they have and the different things that they're testing to reduce flaring. So you will see a reduction in flaring very soon because of the commitment that these operators have to South Texas.
And Mr. Shepherd, where's the infrastructure in West Texas right now on flaring? Is it a little bit behind, or?
Well, similarly situated, I guess. The 400% number you referenced, if that's true, I'd like to compare that to how much has drilling increased.
Sure,
I
sure.
suspect
That's
there's a correlation there. And obviously it takes a little time for folks to determine where they want to make that investment. Do we have a well? Do we need to pipeline, gather it, pipe it, and it takes time to make those business decisions. Even though the Permian's a historic area, the tremendous amount of activity is outstripping our existing infrastructure too. We have many of the same problems that we've already touched on, but as Omar mentioned, the industry recognizes, and then you referenced it, it's money that is not being captured and sold, right? And so everyone has an incentive, whether it's for environmental reasons, which are significant, and concerns that industry takes very seriously, or economic concerns. So we're not in the sort of the oh wow kind of moment that maybe some of the Eagle Ford areas are, but we're sort of amazed at in part of the western part of your district down in the Delaware Basin. I mean, tremendous level of relatively new drilling out there. And there's hardly any towns, but nevertheless, industry's investing in the infrastructure to capture the gas, and there's other incentives too. We've been in discussions with the folks at McDonald Observatory. Those flares emit light, of course, at nighttime, and there's a number of sort of light pollution issues that have been discussed, legislature's dealt with historically, and we're looking at ways to reduce our lighting sort of footprint, if you will, and that includes flaring. So there's a number of reasons why people are looking at this, and the technology is catching up very quickly.
Senator, do you think the flaring concerns right now are legitimate, or are we going to kind of just let technology catch up? Is there anything that for lawmakers to do in addressing that issue?
Well, I think it is a legitimate concern, and of course I represent part of San Antonio, and I know they're very concerned about it as well, but there has been, again, a lot of discussion. I think it's something that we're certainly going to be discussing this next legislative session. What makes me feel comfortable is that the industry acknowledges that it's an issue. They're trying to deal with the issue as quickly as possible and as responsibly as possible as well, but there are legitimate concerns that the city of San Antonio in particular has raised. And as we move forward, I think you're going to see us all come together and try to come up with some solutions.
And Mr. Martinez, as you're listening to stakeholders, various stakeholders that you're gathering in the Eagle Ford, is that a major concern, or are there other concerns that are sort of rising to the top of when you talk environmental issues or what have you?
It's a concern. I'm not sure if it's a major, it's not the primary concern, but it's a concern, and legitimately so. We should care about our environment. But as far as impact in our communities and the way our citizens and anyone that's using the area, it's not the overwhelming topic. I think that we're more concerned about what's happening to our communities from an infrastructure perspective.
The roads.
We're wondering, the roads are a huge thing, as you well know. But beyond that, there's the water issue, that things that we think that, or issues that can be solved. But I do see the industry attempting to step up to the plate every time that it's brought up. It's part of the process. And certainly our communities, our leadership in our communities would like to see a stronger role that the state plays in trying to address the infrastructure issues. To them, that's the bigger priority.
Sure. One other, it's kind of a wonky infrastructure issue that I've been interested in a little bit, and Mr. Shepherd, we've talked about it in the past, is kind of what has happened to the grid in West Texas, and because even though we have built up billions of dollars in power line infrastructure, there's still a lot of areas that aren't served by power lines, and as a result, different operators, new people coming to the region are sort of plugging into the grid and have overwhelmed it and led to some really high congestion fees on their utility bills. And I'm wondering kind of how you see that process going. Is West Texas out of the woods in terms of high cost energy, and what's the industry doing to try to lower its, figure out how to lower its own cost?
Well, that is sort of a wonky issue, but one we deal with. We have a committee dedicated to that, actually. And $1 million extra on top of your regular monthly electric bill will get your attention. And a couple summers ago, we had a lot of companies experiencing more than that. So we have dialogue. We've opened up dialogue. We've got a consortium of companies. It's a big problem. We've outstripped our infrastructure in this area too, like others. We have, though, begun a dialogue that appears to be very, very productive with the PUC and ERCOT about trying to do a better job of forecasting our load, if you will. Where are we going to be drilling the next 500 wells? In this quadrant, in this fairway, if you will, where there's no electricity yet. And all these factors come into it. We've dropped, oil prices have dropped 20% in the last 2 months. So that if I'm a utility, I'm looking there saying, well, is this going to slow down? Are they really going to drill these next 200 wells or not? Do we invest those millions of dollars in the hard lines to get the service out there? So it's a serious concerns, but we've got a great dialogue going. One aspect of that is when we don't have electricity, we've got to run generators, and generators emit emissions, for lack of a better term. And so, we want to be on the grid as quickly as possible. And part of that, congestion you're talking about is, as we all probably in this audience know, that not only does West Texas and Texas in general lead the league, so to speak, in oil production, but also in wind. And all that West Texas wind is crowding out the grid. And so that's what some of the things that have led to some of the congestion.
Sure. Well, I was going to open it up to questions if anybody has them, and I think we have a mic circulating somewhere throughout the audience. Oh yeah, just come up. Yeah, sorry. And if you want to go first, here on this side.
Hi guys. On? Not on, I can just ask that. Can you hear me? So I've had the pleasure of working with each of you at some point, either in West Texas or South Texas. And I know that you guys always have to answer a lot of tough questions and spread your resources pretty thin, but
about how personally this has affected you guys and how this job is not just sitting on panels and doing quotes for interviews, but just kind of the round-the-clock impact that it's had on you guys personally.
Do you want to jump in?
Well, I guess I'll start. I've learned a lot. I can tell you, I'm an attorney, and I took oil and gas 20-something years ago, never realized that I would need it, and so it has affected me. But I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn. These panels, believe it or not, we're learning by sitting on these panels and listening to other folks in the audiences, so we appreciate that y'all do this. It has become, one of the biggest issues that I deal with as a senator on a daily basis. There's a number of issues, there's a myriad of them, as you know. 5,000 bills are filed every legislative session, but this has become one of the most important issues I deal with, primarily because it affects my district, the heart of my district, on both ends as well.
I'll just add to that not only is it a more regular legislative discussion, these energy issues across the board, in association land where I live, we've talked a lot about the positive aspects of on people's lives and communities and things like that, but there's also the voice out there that's not necessarily a big fan of the industry for whatever reason. And so we're frankly constantly addressing various concerns that are brought up, some legitimate concerns which get us to a better place, some maybe not so much, maybe more emotionally based. And so that takes up a tremendous amount of energy and time. When I started out in the Permian 8 years ago, it was me and one other person in the office. That was it. We now have an office in Santa Fe. Of course, the Permian straddles the New Mexico line, and so we work the New Mexico side of things too. And we also have an Austin office, and we've got 5 people in Midland, just to address not only the operational concerns, the infrastructure issues, but some of the political challenges we have. So it's an overwhelming, some days, kind of job.
I think for me, growing up in South Texas, just outside the Eagle Ford in Kingsville in Claiborne County, about 30 miles south of Corpus Christi, just in the 2 years that I've had this job is seeing the impact that the Eagle Ford has had on South Texas, on communities, on families, on friends, opportunities that they would have never had. South Texas had never grown in the last 50 years. It was hunting and agriculture, that's it. And to see the impact and people being able to spend more money, provide a better education for their kids is phenomenal. I mean, I'd have never thought in the last 10 years that I would have an oil and gas job and then my brother would be in San Antonio working for Halliburton, having a highly skilled job as well too. So from a personal standpoint, seeing what it has done for South Texas and the benefits that it continues to give South Texas is phenomenal. Just as a native of this area, it's a blessing to this area.
Personally, I mean, I'd just like to add on everything that's been said here, from learning and to what I call the transformation of South Texas. It's not just a few counties, it's South Texas is being transformed. And I never thought, I used to be the county judge. I was a county judge in LaSalle County, which is Cotulla, which is in the heart of what's happening right now. And I was there from 1982 to 1994, 12 years. And when I talk about the high unemployment, when I talk about going out and trying to find businesses and trying to make South Texas a place where people would not leave, where we wouldn't be experiencing the brain drain of our young people having to leave our communities, it's something that's very close to me because I experienced it. I was a city council, I was a mayor of Cotulla for 6 years before I became the county judge for 12 years. All these years, I never imagined that we would be going through this. And to see it from a personal perspective and knowing now that that we're in the midst of some additional impacts or benefits, challenges, opportunities, whatever you want to call them, because of what's about to happen on the ports, with what could happen with natural gas, with our friends from Mexico and the energy reform, on a daily basis trying to engage with what's happening in South Texas. I look at that, and to me, I never imagined that I would be going through this, and so that's something that you talk about when you choose to be in public service, but I never thought that we would be at this point, and to have so many facets, so many people included, so many partners that have been created. It's been an incredible experience for us. Incredible.
Go ahead. Another question over here?
Sure. Mr. Shepherd and Mr. Garcia. Sorry. It's all right. Is this better? Okay.
No, it was better before.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Are you here all week?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Mr. Shepherd, Mr. Garcia, and Mr. Martinez, y'all represent groups of producers, and you bring them together and collaborate and things. I was wondering if each of you could talk about, it seems like the conversation today talked about how quickly things have ramped up and how we do have needs and we need to address those needs, but we've been so focused on the work of producing the resources and we're catching our breath and now we're working toward the solutions. I wonder if there's any role for, what are your producers doing, what are your groups doing in terms of collaborating on public-private partnerships? And then Senator URESTI, is there a role for the legislature to help those public-private partnerships along next session so that we can address some of the education, the infrastructure, and some of those concerns that y'all have talked about this morning?
Well, I'll just start off, Adam, thank you. Yeah, I think you already see that. I think you see the community colleges at UTSA obviously has played a critical role with the reports, hosting these venues for the last several years. Commissioner Porter has events here as well. So I think you're already seeing those partnerships between the colleges and the universities and the industry, and I think it's important. I think it's very critical that we have that relationship, and I think you'll see us continuing to foster that and to push that forward.
Anybody have anything quick to add? And then
Adam, I think it's a great question. You're going to see STEER continue to work with public entities. In the last 2 years, we've worked very closely with the San Antonio River Authority. We talk about water. We have a great relationship with the River Authority to talk about water issues as it pertains to the San Antonio River. They're doing some baseline sampling on the river. We've been very much engaged. We've been at the table with them, and it's been a great partnership. We've also been very engaged with the Alamo Area Council of Governments. They're the lead agency that has been hired by TCQ to work on some of these air studies. We have been at the table. Industry has been at the table providing the information needed, and you're going to continue to see industry be part of the solution, not the problem. And we were very, very dedicated and focused to working with public entities in South Texas.
And for us, a trademark of the creation of the consortium had a lot to do with the industry being at the table and bringing all the key stakeholders together. It was community-based, but at the same time, at the table, unhesitantly, was the ANGA group at Chesapeake, Anadarko, Pioneer. It was just a number of industry companies that came to the table that fully understood that we were trying to organize at the local level to protect our communities, to have sustainable visions. And they've been key partners since day one. That to us was a huge message that I think had a lot to do with in bringing other partners to the table.
we get another question over here.
Yes, my question is both to Omar and Senator URESTI. We've talked almost 2 years ago now about industry protecting San Antonio's air quality, and I appreciate the work that you have done with Alamo Area Council of Governments to protect San Antonio's air quality. And at the time you told me that we're voluntarily going to take care of this issue, we're not going to impact San Antonio's air quality, that you're going to have proper worker training and proper things going on. And now the Express News, I don't know if y'all can hear me, the Express News has reported that we've had as much gas flared in these uncontrolled flares as CPS Energy uses in a year. Yes, you may have a few of your industries and a few of your companies trying to do the right thing, but TECQ has one page, and this is where I address Senator URESTI.
Can make it a question, though.
One page on flaring. It's all we have. Colorado recently passed 144 pages worth of safeguards. Can you continue and get this and bring this down in a voluntary status? And is the legislature have a sense of urgency getting a level playing field out there to stop all this waste of our natural resources and hurting our San Antonio air quality?
Sure, and I appreciate your question, and I think the one page is not going to cut it, clearly. I haven't read the report that Colorado put out or their legislation, but it's going to be on the forefront. I can tell you that issue, in my opinion, will be on the forefront this next legislative session. And I know the industry is listening. I know they're aware of it. The city of San Antonio made it loud and clear. They're very concerned about it. And it's an issue that I'll be looking at as well.
Russ, I appreciate the question. I always appreciate the partnership that you have and your honesty in giving me time to speak with you. But, you know, as mentioned earlier, we're doing everything we can to catch up and reduce emissions. It's something that's top of mind for industry. You've seen TCEQ, they're going to add another monitor in Karn City. You've seen them recently partner with the University of Texas on an air emission study that was focused in the Eagle Ford. You know, I think one of the biggest things is my previous job being in economic development. The city of San Antonio is very concerned about air quality. It's an economic development tool for them. They want to, San Antonio wants to remain in attainment. But we've been having this issue for 10 years. I got to San Antonio in 2005 and we were pretty much close to being out of attainment. So it's an issue that's been ongoing. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something that we want to be at the table with. You're going to continue to see our member companies involved with ACOG, with TCEQ, as we all address this issue together.
Any other questions? Time for probably one more.
In terms of the changing state of energy, we have a tremendous development going on with energy reform in Mexico right across the border. And I'm wondering, as they're confronting that, it's just going to be a whole new novel experience. And really, two-part question. Learning what we've learned here in South Texas so far, we have a good set of problems. Certainly a lot of good parts, but problems go with it. And we're learning we can really be the role model for the world because there's shale energy fields all over the world now that have been discovered and will be developed in the coming decades. So first, what lessons would you recommend to Mexico and other countries getting into this? And then the second part is, how can we as a Texas industry, when we learn all this technology and innovate it, how can we become exporters to the world of our experience? Because that's a way to really prolong this boom, I think.
Any lessons for those in Mexico watching our live stream?
I'll just start with, because we've been communicating with different groups from Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas, which is our bordering states on the shale, on the Eagle Ford Shale. Burgos and the Cuenca runs right next to, along the state of Tamaulipas. And so we, basically our talks with them talk about the one thing that we all know. You can't possibly be prepared from an infrastructure perspective. Now, if you think that we were not prepared in South Texas, you can imagine in the rural, if you look at the designated areas that Pemex has designated, those are even more rural. There's even less infrastructure. And capacity building becomes a huge thing. Being able to, and so our communication with them, we talk about that. That's the biggest lesson that we can talk about. The second thing is that participation and that investment that government has to make. Because remember that in Mexico, the mineral owners, they don't exist. Everything belongs to the government. So the investment needs to come from them. And our urgency to them is to set up the type of structure, as you well know, Bob, the leyes secundarias, the secondary laws that is going to govern that is going to make reference to making sure that the proper tools are in place. Otherwise, as far as American investors, they're going to be very hesitant to participate in that play. And so they're trying to be as open as they can about this, you well know. And so our advice to them is to in order to prepare for that, the process that they have in place is it's at least 2-3 years away. But they're already in round zero, and so that is just a preparation for everything. I think that's the biggest advice. We tried to learn that from Bakken. We like to learn that from Marcellus when we made our trips over there. And even then, we didn't realize the type of infrastructure impact that they were talking about.
Sure.
That's-
Let me add to that real quick. I know we're almost out of time, but I agree with what LEODORO said, but keep in mind too, that to build that capacity in Mexico, it's going to have an impact on our infrastructure as well, on our bridges and our highways and our roads. And so as we're talking about this next session and going forward, we need to keep that in mind. Texas is going to continue to explode as a result of that, but we have to be prepared for it.
Sure, and it'll be fun to watch. And with that, if we can give our guests a round of applause. And thanks for listening.
Well done, sir. Thank you.